let's turn our attention to the Wednesday night games. Chelsea entertained Schalke. They beat them 3-0, both home and away, last season. They took the lead early on with a Fabregas goal, and it looked like the Chelsea were going to steamroll them, but it didn't. Didier Drogba started up front. Was there perhaps a little bit too much sentiment in Jose's mind? And why didn't he start low at Remy?
Well, I think the talk was that he wanted to manage Costa a little bit in terms of his injury and his hamstring and whatever. But you're right, I think that perhaps he'll look back on it, Mourinho, same as Brendan Rodgers might have done when he rested Sterling. There's certain players, that, there's certain things in the side, that dynamic player up front, and unfortunately Drogba is not that player anymore. And I would have liked to have seen Remy start. I think that was a problem last year, that he never really gave Demba Ba a run. Obviously we've seen Torres before, but is Remy going to fall into the same mould as Demba Ba? Come on as a sub and get little bits and pieces of a game, and it may have been the perfect opportunity, but I think Mourinho probably went for Drogba's European experience, and sometimes that could cloud your judgment a little bit. And I think if he could have it again, he probably would have maybe gone with Costa. I don't know. I don't think he was injured. I just think he was resting him because he has had this hamstring. But once again, we've talked about Brendan Rodgers' perhaps inexperience, and then we talk about Jose Mourinho, vastly experienced, and it just shows you that perhaps you can't get it right all the time.
Maybe he had his eye, or one eye, or half an eye, on Manchester City for the weekend. Now, this is the juggling act that we just spoke about. Brendan has got. We know Arsene Wenger's been through it. Jose's been through it. And Pellegrini, to a certain extent, has been through it both in this country and abroad. Do you think that they're guilty, some of these managers, of looking too far ahead? The next game surely is the most important one. Why would you look ahead to I know City's a massive game, but surely winning your first Champions League game is as important as the next game.
It's interesting because I once spoke to Alex Ferguson about it. How do you juggle up such a massive season when you're fighting on all fronts? And he was looking 4 or 5 weeks ahead for his team selection. Well, if I was a player, I think I'd want that. I'd want to play. If I just had a disappointment against Schalke or whatever, I would like to have Man City focus in my mind and more than perhaps a lesser light in the Premier League where I could get a bit complacent. It's game on. So I don't think Mourinho will need to motivate his players at all against Man City. We all know how big a game that is. But I do think that sometimes managers perhaps a little bit too clever for their own good and try to think too far ahead. Accept the next game and get on with that and try and get the result in the next game as opposed to thinking the game beyond that.
You mentioned Manchester City. Of course, Chelsea faced them this weekend. If Jose's had one eye on it, he played at home against Schalke. It's arguable to say that Pellegrini had the toughest of all of the games against a former champion just a couple of years ago, one of the best sides in Europe over the last 3 or 4 seasons away at Bayern Munich. How do you see that game going? I thought Joe Hart was outstanding. I thought it was a slightly more mature performance from Man City without getting the result.
No, I think that overall, I think Bayern deserved the result to get. Obviously, to 8-9 minutes, we felt that Man City might have got that point. It would have been a big point as well. But back to the Premier League, I think that last season, Pellegrini learnt very quickly, especially away from home, where he got some real poor results against the lesser lights of the Premier League, away to Cardiff, etc., and got didn't pick the results up, and he learnt very quickly. And Chelsea went there and done a job on them, a very professional job, which Mourinho seems to manage to do against the top sides. He's got a game plan. Went to Old Trafford without a centre forward. Went to Man City and really dominated the game. This is a fascinating match this weekend, Man City versus Chelsea, because I think Chelsea. I don't think Mourinho's in that position where he'd go there without a centre forward anymore. I think he's got. I think I go back to perhaps when Mourinho's back in the first in the Premier League, where he had these untouchables. He had these 8 untouchables that he liked to keep on talking about. I've got 8 players that are going to play. I think he's got that now. I think he's got 8 certain starters for this weekend, and he mixes and matches the others. Whereas Pellegrini, I think, has got 1 or 2 selection dilemmas. Does he start with Aguero, or does he stick with Xhaka? Does he flood that midfield because Chelsea is so strong in there? And I think when I look at the two sides, physically, I think Chelsea are the stronger. Finesse and perhaps players on the ball, I think that Man City may have a bit more. But can they impose that on such a strong Chelsea outfit? So I think Pellegrini has got more of the selection problem this weekend than Mourinho. But I think that, as you said, it was a more mature performance in the Champions League. But can they go 8 points off of Chelsea if they get beat this weekend, even at this early stage? Is that too big a gap?
Well, go back to the Champions League. Manchester City have spent an awful lot of money. We know that Sheikh Mansour wanted that Premier League title, which he's got. They won the FA Cup. They've won the League Cup. This is the one thing that they want to progress in. Mancini proved he wasn't good enough. Pellegrini got out of the group. They probably and should have maybe spent a bit more time concentrating on the Bayern Munich game last season. If they'd scored another goal, they'd have topped the group. Yeah. But where do you see City in this Champions League? Because their squad and the players they've got tell us that they can go a very long way.
Yeah, and I think the signings he's made, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. There was no last minute panic. You know, he got the players in he wanted, and players left the club. So I think you're right. I think he probably won't own up to this, but he is probably thinking Champions League. You know, no disrespect, but you can finish first, second, or third, or even fourth in the Premier League and qualify again. But to win it, and I think that may be that he might prioritise. But he's got a squad strong enough at the moment to mix and match. He's lost Jovetic, who's a big loss to him at the moment, but he has got a squad strong enough. So I think he may be prioritising and wanting to win the Champions League more perhaps than the Premier League, but you can't talk like that when you go into this game the weekend. But I think they're strong enough to get out of their group, and that's got to be their aim, because once they do that, then it's game on.
Well, it's a killer goal towards the end. Boateng, of course, a former player. He certainly enjoyed celebrating that one.
It was nice to see that, actually. Like a former player celebrating a goal against his old team, because why not? You know what I mean? You see players score a goal and go, oh, run round the pitch, especially in the 89th minute.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
Can't want that one out.
In terms of managers and what Jose did, Jose rested Loic Remy and Costa. We saw Aguero on the bench as well. It just goes to show how difficult it is to juggle. You mentioned there that Sterling didn't play against Aston Villa because of the Champions League game. Arsenal in a slightly different position because they've got so many injuries at the back there. It just goes to show how tough it is for all managers to juggle League and Champions League.
Yeah, and it's man management and rotate, being brave enough to rotate and still expecting to get the result when you're, on some occasions, weakened your side. So I think that looking at the four clubs in midweek, I think only Liverpool, who scraped through, can come out of it thinking, you know what?
Is it about the result or is it about the performance?
Oh, it's the result. First game, second game in that group, to get something from it, so you're still in touching distance. And apart from Arsenal, the other two, the three clubs did that. Performances are not the major thing. It's getting the point or points on the ball in that first game.
So from what you've seen in the opening game, although it's very early days, and from what you know of the squads and the managers, let's go through them systematically. Arsenal, how far will they get?
I think Arsenal got a bit to do. I think they've got a bit to do to qualify in their group, because it's away form. It looks as if when they come up against the stronger sides, they can't really get their game going. So I think Arsenal got a bit to do to qualify from their group.
Liverpool got Real Madrid.
I know, but I think that was such a massive result against Graz, and it's got them the 3 points. So I think obviously Real Madrid being in there is going to be tough, but I think Liverpool could get through that.
Chelsea, arguably the easiest group of all of them, and I include every single club in the Champions League. It's a disappointing result, but...
Yeah, and I think Mourinho showed his experience and just took it on the chin and moved on to the next game. I don't think he was unduly concerned by it, disappointed, but he knows there's a long way to go, and he's got the team and the squad. And
City, I mean, they've got the real tough group. And Rome, of course, put 5 past CSKA. That's a tough group. That is arguably the toughest group of any. Yeah,
I think we all saw that when the groups were formed, and we felt that perhaps Man City, even with their squad, had the toughest group and perhaps the more difficult out of English sides to get through, and I still think that's the case. I think that although it was a much more mature performance, I think that group is so strong they could go right to the wire. And if you ask me now, I think they could struggle to get through it.
Who's going to go the furthest? Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, or City?
Chelsea.